y'all. This is my June wrap-up. These are all the books I read in June, but just so you know, we have a new foster dog, and she's a corgi mix, and she's sitting right here in a little dog bed, and she's so cute. I can't handle it. So if I'm a little distracted, it's because Jenna here is the most precious BB ever.
Isn't that right? She's pretty shaved down because she had to have a couple surgeries. Yeah, and then Hiccup over there is just mega jealous. But she's sticking pretty close to me, so we have a filming friend today.
To be transparent, it is not quite the end of June, but it is the weekend before, and just looking ahead, I don't have time to film this like during the week, so I'm going to film all of the books I've read up to this point, which is June 27th. So most of June has elapsed, and if I do end up reading more books in the next couple of days, I will include them probably just in my July wrap-up. We have 20 books to talk about, so let us get started with rereads. These are all books that I listened to while I was trying to fall asleep, and you can tell that I had a pretty bad sleeping month for how many books I was able to complete. So first of all, we have the Song of a Lioness Quartet by Tamara Pierce. So Alana, the First Adventure, In the Hand of the Goddess, book 2, The Woman Who Rides Like a Man, book 3, and Lioness Rampant, book 4. So I read the entire quartet. I'm not even going to give you a summary because I talk about those books all the time. Great middle grade fantasy. And then I continued with Tamara Pierce by reading Wild Magic, which is book 1 of the Immortals Quartet, and book 2, which is called Wolf Speaker. So I was able to accomplish 6 Tamara Pierce books this month. Yikes. It was a rough one. I ended up staying up quite late reading, just trying to fall asleep. And those are all 5-star books for me for nostalgia reasons. The last book that I reread was Graceling by Kristen Kishore. This was also a 5 stars. And again, I'm not going to summarize this one because I talk about them constantly. The next category I'm going to talk about are the romance books I read this month. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Something to Talk About by Meryl Wisner. And to be transparent, I haven't finished this book yet, but I will complete it by the end of the month. So I'm just going to give you a quick summary and my initial thoughts of this book. So I read about 50%, and this is following Joe and Emma, and Joe is a Hollywood actress turned successful screenwriter, and Emma is her assistant, and this is a romance between the two of them. And so far it is a very slow burn. They haven't even gotten together at the 50% mark, but there are lots of feelings, and they're trying to deny their feelings for each other. Joe is 40, I believe, and Emma is 27. So there is an age gap. However, I think it is addressed really well, and I don't have a problem with that age gap because Emma is older. She is an adult. She's a big girl. She can make decisions for herself. So I am liking this so far. The plot of this book kicks off when the two of them are photographed on the red carpet, and Emma is laughing at a joke that Joe made, and everyone thinks that they're dating. So they're, you know, trying to deny the claims, but maybe there's something to those claims in the media. And so far this is giving me like a 3 or a 4-star vibe, but the two characters are very cute, and their points of view when they're thinking about each other are adorable. There is kind of a stupid plot thing though, where Emma is upset with Joe and she doesn't address that she's upset, she just kind of sulks, and I don't really like that. So definitely like a 3 or a 4-star vibe so far. The other romance book I read was One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston, and this was great. I gave it 4 stars, and this follows August, who is a grad student, and she moves in with a bunch of queer people at the beginning of the story, and she runs across Jane Sue on the train, and she keeps seeing Jane on the train every single day, and August starts to realize that there's something going on. And come to find out, Jane is actually from the 70s and is stuck in a time loop on the train. So August is trying to help Jane get back to her time period, and they fall in love, and this was great. Breaking it down, I gave the romance a 5 out of 5 stars. There's good steam in here. I was blushing. Great side characters, everybody's queer and everybody's like a POC, and that's great. The found family made me weep in here. How much these characters love each other as friends was beautiful. And like I said, the diversity is great in here. You've got lots of POC and different types of queer people who have different interests. Loved that. The one thing that I didn't love about this book was I thought there were a lot of plot conveniences, and things kind of fell into place really easily for the characters at times. Not too much, but here's an example. So August starts skipping class and skipping work. So she works at a restaurant, and she doesn't come in for 3 weeks, and she doesn't go to class for 3 weeks. And when she finally starts coming back, everyone's like, okay, yeah, you're back. Your grades are totally fine, and you're not fired from the restaurant. So it was just like, that was a little unrealistic and unbelievable. So aside from the sci-fi elements, that was the most unbelievable part, was like everything was just like hunky-dory after she just went AWOL. And there were other plot conveniences that I felt throughout the story. However, overall, I still had a good time with the plot. So I gave the plot like a 3 out of 5 stars. So I balanced it out by giving this book a total of 4 out of 5 stars. I still really loved these characters a lot, and I would definitely reread this. And it's not as good, in my opinion, as Red, White, and Royal Blue, but I still think of this book very fondly. It did make me cry a little bit, so there's that. This next category is horror, but I don't really know what category or what genre this book is. And it was my favorite book I read this month, so please help me in the comments below, because I loved this next book, and that is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This is a polyamorous queer retelling of Dracula and Dracula's brides. This is told from Dracula's first bride, who is Constanta, and she is basically writing a final love letter to Dracula, and she never names him. She just says you, but she is writing to Dracula, and she said in the first part of the book, she says, I don't want to give you any more power than you already have. So that's why she doesn't name him in this book. This was heartbreaking and beautifully written, and this was perfect. This was a perfect book. The writing made me weep. The story made me weep. And this is about, I mean, Dracula in this story is abusive to his partners, and so this is a story of abuse. So huge trigger warning for that, obviously. But the way that it is told is so powerful. So it's a hard book to read for the abuse, and it's mostly he doesn't hurt them physically, but he emotionally abuses his partners constantly, and that's tough to read about. But I think this is done in such a good way to show the progression of Constanta and the other 2 partners, of them being abused for hundreds of years because they're vampires, right? And what happens at the end of that relationship. Not to spoil anything, but them taking back the power that they have been stripped of in the relationship. This is beautiful. This is very short. It's a short novella, I'd say, or a short story. It made me weep. I love it so much. I finished the book and then like held it to my chest for a little bit because it was just so heartbreaking and beautiful and haunting and sexy. So that's why I don't know what category this is, because this isn't a romance, but it centers like this polyamorous relationship, because it's an abusive relationship. So is it a romance? Because it's got smut, which I loved, but it's got smut and abusive romance, but also like they're vampires, so there's that element of horror. So I'm not quite sure what genre this is. I classify it as a horror romance. I don't know, help me out in the comments down below, but I highly recommend this. This was my favorite thing I read this month. So 5 out of 5 stars for A Dowry of Blood. All right, the next category is nonfiction, and I finished one nonfiction book this month, and that was Lady Killers. I think this is Deadly Women Throughout History or something is the subtitle, by Tori Telfer. This is a nonfiction about female serial killers throughout history. I find this subject fascinating. I'm sure many of you can relate that true crime can be very interesting. And the thing that I appreciated about this book specifically was how the author was able to reframe these women and give context to the historical period, to when these women were killing, but also demystifying these women, because a lot of female serial killers, one, don't get the attention or the media coverage that male serial killers do. And when they do get attention in the media or in society, they are often sexualized or mythologized or in that sort of thing. So this was really breaking that bias away from these women and saying, no, these women were just killers because they wanted to kill people, and taking away some of that mythology behind these women. And so I think this followed 14 different chapters of lady killers, and I thought this was great. I ended up giving it 5 stars because I really just appreciated that recontextualization of these women, as well as like the story themselves about the murders were, you know, gruesome, obviously, but also fascinating. So I ended up giving this book 5 out of 5 stars. All right, the next category we have is fantasy. I was able to read 3 fantasy novels this month, and the first 2 are The Empress of Salt and Fortune and When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain, both by Ni Vo. This is a series of queer folklore style fantasy novellas following Guy. It sounds like Guy in the audiobook, who is a non-binary cleric who is researching folklore and history. So The Empress of Salt and Fortune follows Guy as they are discovering the story of the relationship between Rabbit, who was a handmaiden, and the Empress of Salt and Fortune, whose name was Inyo. And so Rabbit, who is a human, by the way, Rabbit is telling the story to Guy. So we have a frame narrative and we have the story itself. I ended up giving book 1 3 out of 5 stars because I ended up not caring about the frame narrative very much. It wasn't very interesting, and it kept interrupting the flow of the story of Inyo and Rabbit and their romance. So while I loved the queer story between Rabbit and Inyo, the frame narrative didn't do it for me, and because it was told in this style, there was a lot of distance between the characters and the reader. So I just didn't feel as emotionally impacted because of the way that the story was told. So I still liked it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Book 2, however, in this novella series, When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain, I gave 4 stars too. So I really liked it a lot more. It still has a frame narrative style with it follows Guy again. However, the frame narrative is much more interesting, and it actually has its own story. Basically, the frame narrative is Guy and this traveler are trapped in a barn, and there's 3 tigers waiting for them to come out of the barn. And so the tigers are telling Guy a story. And so the story is about a tiger and a scholar falling in love, and it's, again, queer. And in this universe, the tigers can turn into humans, so it's not like bestiality or anything. It's a love story between, 2 humans, but one of them can turn into a tiger. I would recommend reading these books physically because in the audio version, it was really hard to tell for both of these books when the frame narrative and the story within the story, they kept interweaving a lot. So it wasn't like chapter here of this story, a chapter of this story. They were like really locked together, and it was a little confusing to parse the different stories via audio, but I think that would be much more clear if you read it physically and could see and visually see when the frame narrative was interjecting with the story itself. The last fantasy book that I read and what I spent most of my month reading was The Sword of Kaigan by M.L. Wang. This was almost perfect for me. This was a fantastic fantasy novel. This follows 2 characters, Mizaki, who is a housewife and who in the past used to be a fighter. And we're also following her son, Mamoru, as Mamoru is uncovering things about the Empire that aren't so flattering. He's realizing that the Empire has been telling him lies his whole life, and it's kind of throwing his world upside down. So Mamoru turns to his mother for comfort and advice amidst the backdrop of political and tensions between the Empire and another empire or another kingdom. So there's, looming war possible on the backdrop of these 2 characters, and this was heartbreaking. I cried. Obviously, there's a lot of trigger warnings for this because this is a war story. You can see it's a Theonite war story, so things associated with war are included in this novel. So murder, genocide, rape, death of a child, death of a parent. There's a lot. This is a heavy fantasy book. But I loved this so much. The character development, the character arcs in here were some of the best that I've ever read, period, in a fantasy. And this is a standalone. However, it is connected to M.L. Wang's other 2 books as kind of a prequel. They are in the same universe, but you can read this as a standalone. That is where my biggest complaint is about this book. The ending of the book, in my opinion, did a lot to try and connect this story with the other books and the rest of the world and like a bigger conflict going on, and that felt kind of clunky and chunky to me. I was like, I care about Mizaki and Mamoru's story, and the last 100 or 200 pages just felt like a lot of tying in of one story to the other. So I ended up giving this 5 out of 5 stars, but I just really didn't like that bit of the ending. The last and the largest category we have to talk about are sci-fi. So I'm gonna try to like blaze through bunch of these sci-fi books because we have a lot to talk about. So first, and unfortunately the one that I didn't absolutely love, was Local Star by Amy Ogden. This is a short little sci-fi novella, and this is polyamorous. I ended up giving this book 2.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was just okay. Like, I was reading it and I was like, okay, that was fine. So not like the best reaction ever. I didn't think it was bad, but I just wasn't super tied to any of these characters. And the reason that I liked this and I was interested is because it's polyamorous, it's queer, and that was explored really well, but the underlying plot that follows Triz, who is our main character, and she's a mechanic. The plot surrounding Triz and her partners and like the drama that happens wasn't super well fleshed out in my opinion, and I didn't connect to these characters as much because of it. I didn't think the writing was terrible, I didn't think it was great, I just thought it was okay, and that's a little disappointing, but I do recommend this if you were looking for more polyamory, more queer literature, and this is just a fun little romp. It's super short. I read it in one sitting and it was okay. The next few books, I don't own physical copies, so I kind of scooted over a little bit so you can see more of the books. And the next book I read was Nine Fox Gambit by Yoon-Ha Lee. This is the first book in a trilogy. This follows a captain in the military named Cheris, and she basically like resurrects a war general who went mad and genocided both his army and the opposing army. And they basically stored his consciousness. She's kind of resurrecting him to help her take over a fortress. So the Fortress of Scattered Needles, which is what's on the cover, was taken over by the enemy, and so the whole plot is them trying to take back the fortress with this brilliant general and this queer captain. And again, so I gave this book 3 stars, and unfortunately I again just thought it was okay because there are no subplots at all. What I just described, them trying to take back the fortress, is the entire plot. That is it. It's pretty slow paced. It's kind of a long book for just having one plot. The world building and the mathematical warfare in this book, very, very interesting, but the way that it was told was not my favorite. We jump around to a bunch of different perspectives that seems super random. So mostly we're following Cheris and Jidao, who is the general, but then we get like inside the fortress, these random sporadic chapters of these random characters, and I was just like, I don't care. That is just not my preferred storytelling method. So I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. I do recommend it if you like war stories. Compared to the Sword of Kagan, this is very like PG-13, very tame as far as war stories go. So I enjoyed it, but I don't think I enjoyed it enough to keep reading the rest of the series, just because I didn't enjoy the narration style. One thing I do want to mention is Yoon-Ha Lee, the author, is a trans queer man, and we love to support trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming, and queer authors on this channel. And I really tried to read a lot of queer books this month, so hopefully that comes across in this wrap-up. Next, we have The Disasters by M.K. England. This is a young adult sci-fi romp following Nax, who is a bisexual boy. We love to see it, and he basically collects a crew of misfits, and they have to save the universe. They have to save the colony. So the Earth has started colonizing different planets, and there is a conspiracy that the Earth First cult is trying to destroy all of the colonies, and so they can focus all of the money and resources on fixing planet Earth instead of shipping people out and spending resources on the colonies in, you know, the rest of the galaxy. And this was cute. This was fun. It was super campy and kind of cheesy, but in a fun way, in my opinion. This was queer. There is a little bit of a love triangle, you know, and I was kind of rooting for it to just become a triad, but you know, that's just me. And I just thought it was cute. I thought it was fun. I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next 3 books that I have to talk about are all in the Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers. So that includes Closed and Common Orbit, A Record of a Spaceborne Few, and The Galaxy and the Ground Within. So I'm going to talk about these books together, even though I gave them different star ratings. So the first book in this series I read back in like January or February, and these next couple books in the series are standalones and so they're following different characters in this universe, but they do go in chronological order. So I do recommend you read them in order if you want to read all 4 books, but they do work well as individual standalones. I will say that. So let's talk about my favorite, which was book 2, A Closed and Common Orbit. So this follows an AI who used to be in a ship. She used to be in a ship, and she ends up inside of an android body, basically. And so it's about her trying to come to terms with her body and making friends and fitting in with society. Her name is Lovelace, but she renames herself to Sidra. And this also follows Pepper, who is helping Sidra, you know, reintegrate into society, and following Pepper's backstory. Pepper was genetically engineered to basically be a slave. And so we're following these 2 ladies. And this is queer, and I cried a lot. Since we're just following these 2 characters, I became really attached to them, and the way that these 2 characters' narratives were woven together was really beautiful and really well done. And I love AIs as characters, artificial intelligences as characters. I just think they add so much depth, and they add such interesting conversations about humanity and individuality to a novel. So this was kind of perfect for me. There is, you know, family, found family elements and friendship elements. There's not really there's not a romance in here at all, but I just thought that the family and the friendship was beautiful. Perfection. So I ended up giving A Closed and Common Orbit literally 5 out of 5 stars. This was, again, probably one of my favorite things I read this month. And book 3 is A Record of a Spaceborne Few, and I didn't enjoy this one as much, but it was still a good time. So this follows 5 characters, and that right there tells you that that's one of the reasons I didn't love it. We're following Eos, who is a caretaker of the dead. She does, you know, embalms, or she disposes of, you know, bodies and gives them the proper burial rites and stuff like that. We have Tessa, who is a mother, Sawyer, who is an immigrant, and Kip, who is a child, and Isabel, who is a scholar. So we have all these 5 characters, and they all revolve around this homesteading spacecraft. And it was really confusing to follow all these characters, not gonna lie. And the thing about Becky Chambers' sci-fi is it's really slow paced and very character driven. So if you're not interested in that, I would steer clear from these books in particular. And these characters were all humans, which is another reason I don't think I enjoyed it as much. In her first 2 books, We had aliens, we had, you know, different types of people and different species. We had AIs, but this was all humans. And so I just didn't think this story was as interesting or as successful as book 1 and 2. And that's all I'll say about it. I just didn't think it was as interesting. Book 4, I gave 4 stars, and that is The Galaxy and the Ground Within. Now, this follows 3 characters who are all aliens, and so it was really funny because they had a couple of conversations about how weird humans are, and I thought that that was just really funny. And the plot of this book is these characters get stuck at a rest stop together, and they have to survive for a couple days while the power is out and they can't go anywhere. And this book is all characters and world building, and honestly I loved that. But like, it's just vibes. All characters and vibes. There's no plot other than what I just said. For this book, I gave it 4 stars because I didn't think it was as emotionally gut-punching as book 2, but I think it still carried good weight to it, and I really like how it all ended and wrapped up. And I hope there's going to be more books in this series because I find these books are really comforting and really sweet. So 4 out of 5 stars to The Galaxy and the Ground Within. Oh boy, and the last book, the last sci-fi book and the last book I read this month was Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. This was precious. This is a queer adult male sci-fi novel debut by Everina Maxwell, and this is about Jinin and Kiem, and they are thrust into a political alliance marriage, and it's about them learning to trust and fall in love with each other, as well as uncover plot stuff, because it's possible that Jinin's former husband was murdered. So it's a little bit of a murder mystery and a bit of a romance. And this was so cute. I would die for Jinin. Jinin, big trigger warning for this one as well for partner abuse. Jinin's previous husband abused him both physically and emotionally, including sexually abusing him. So it's not explicit, like you don't see much of it, but it is there. So I just want to call that out. But because Jinin was abused by his previous partner, he doesn't know how to have a healthy relationship or how to trust his partner, and he just kind of defers to Kiem all the time. And Kiem is such a sweet guy that he just wants to make Jinin happy. And so both of these characters are like trying to like tiptoe around each other because they don't know how to communicate and have a healthy relationship. And over the course of the book, the relationship that they do form is so loving and pure and supportive, and it made me cry. It made me cry for these two. It did have one of those tropes where it was like, oh no, it's the winter time and I got all wet, so we're gonna have to share a bedroll. There's only one tent. And I was just like kind of eating it up though. I actually really loved that. So I ended up giving this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. The reason I docked a half star is because there were some plot things. You know, the two main characters are trying to investigate what's going on, and it felt really obvious to me the whole time. And I was like, okay, you guys are being a little naive with your investigation. And so I was able to predict who done it. So that's kind of why I took off a half star. But I still had a really good time, and I am to die for the romance. Now that my voice is nice and hoarse, I want to say thank you so much for watching. Those were the 20 books I read this month, and I will see you in July. Bye!